July 4th, 1961, 4:15 in the morning, the North Atlantic Ocean. Soviet nuclear submarine K-19 drifts at a depth of 300 meters. On board, 139 men and 16 ballistic missiles armed with nuclear warheads. Suddenly, a dull crack echoes through the reactor compartment. Engineer Boris Korchalov tastes metal and blood in his mouth, the first sign of lethal radiation exposure. He looks at the gauges and realizes the nightmare they had whispered about since day one has begun. K-19 has started to kill. They called her the floating coffin before she ever left port. The reason? A series of horrifying accidents. October 1960, during missile loading, seaman Valentin Lebedev is caught under a slamming hatch. His head is crushed in front of dozens of witnesses. Blood pools on the deck. The crew whispers, "It's a bad omen." 2 weeks later, a welder named Ivan Kulikov falls into the engine room from a height of 15 meters. He dies instantly, his body broken on the machinery below. The accidents keep coming. During the launching ceremony, the champagne bottle doesn't break against the hull. Naval tradition says this means the ship is doomed. Experienced sailors refuse to board. They know what it means. K-19 is cursed. But the Cold War doesn't care about superstitions. The Americans have nuclear submarines. The Soviet Union needs an answer, immediately. K-19 is built in just 17 months, half the normal time. Corners are cut everywhere. Welders work 20-hour shifts. Quality inspections are rushed. Critical systems are left incomplete. The backup cooling system for the nuclear reactor, never installed. Engineers said they'd add it later. There is no later. On April 18, 1961, K-19 is commissioned into service. The crew boards reluctantly. They can feel it in their bones. This submarine wants blood. The problems start before they even leave the dock. Cracks appear in the hull. Pipe welds fail pressure tests. The reactor coolant system shows signs of stress. Chief Engineer Yuri Posviatko writes report after report to Moscow. The submarine is not ready for sea duty. Critical systems require repair. His reports are ignored. Orders are orders. K-19 must sail. The political officers tell the crew they should be proud. This is the most advanced submarine in the Soviet fleet, the finest weapon in the world. But at night, lying in their bunks, the sailors whisper a different name for their boat. Hiroshima. They don't know how right they are. Captain Nikolai Zhatayev takes command. He's 35 years old, one of the youngest captains in the Soviet Navy, a brilliant officer with ice in his veins. But even he feels the weight of dread on this boat. His crew is young, mostly in their early 20s. Boys, really. They look at him with trust in their eyes. They believe he'll keep them safe. Zhatayev wishes he could believe it himself. He inspects every compartment, every system. What he finds terrifies him. Substandard parts, rushed construction, systems that barely function. He submits his own report to Naval Command. K-19 requires extensive repairs before operational deployment. The response comes back within hours. "You have your orders, Captain. Complete your mission." June 1961. K-19 leaves port for her first patrol. The crew tries to stay optimistic. Maybe the curse is just superstition. Maybe they'll prove everyone wrong. But on the third day at sea, a fire breaks out in the radio room. It takes 2 hours to extinguish. On the 5th day, a hydraulic line ruptures, flooding a compartment. On the 7th day, the ventilation system fails, filling the boat with toxic fumes. Men vomit and collapse. The medical officer, Dr. Savrin, works frantically to save them. 3 sailors are evacuated by helicopter, barely alive. The rest of the crew is terrified. K-19 is hunting them, picking them off one by one, but the worst is yet to come. July 3rd, they receive orders to proceed to launch position near the coast of Greenland. A demonstration of Soviet power. They're to test fire one of their nuclear missiles under ice. The crew prepares nervously. Everything must be perfect. One mistake, and they'll never see home again. The submarine dives deep, moving silently beneath the Arctic ice. It's beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Miles of frozen ocean above them. No way to surface in an emergency. They're completely alone. If something goes wrong down here, no one can save them. That night, Zhatayev can't sleep. He walks through the boat checking on his men. They're exhausted. Dark circles under their eyes, hands shaking from stress. Some of them are writing letters home, just in case. In the reactor compartment, the engineers monitor their instruments with grim faces. The reactor is running hot, hotter than it should be, but it's within acceptable parameters, barely. Senior reactor officer Pavel Loktev reports to the captain. The cooling system is unstable. I recommend we abort the mission. Zateyev knows he's right, but he also knows what will happen if he disobeys orders. Court-martial, disgrace, his career destroyed. He makes the decision that will haunt him for the rest of his life. We proceed as planned. July 4th, 4:15 in the morning, engineer Boris Korchalov is on watch in the reactor control room. He's been awake for 16 hours straight. His eyes burn with fatigue. Suddenly, an alarm. Pressure dropping in the primary cooling loop. He looks at the gauge, convinced it's a malfunction. The needle keeps falling, temperature rising. His heart starts to pound. He checks the other instruments. All of them confirm the same nightmare, a coolant leak. Somewhere in the primary loop, radioactive water is escaping. He sounds the alarm and runs to inspect the reactor compartment. The moment he opens the hatch, he knows. The air burns his lungs. His skin tingles. A metallic taste floods his mouth. Radiation, massive amounts of it. He sees the leak. A crack in the coolant pipe, water shooting out under 200 atmospheres of pressure. Radioactive steam filling the compartment. The reactor temperature is soaring. 800 degrees and climbing. He slams the hatch shut and runs to the captain. Sir, we have a reactor emergency. Catastrophic coolant failure. We're heading toward meltdown. Captain Zateyev arrives in the control room. His face is pale but calm. He asks for a damage assessment. The news is devastating. The leak cannot be stopped. The backup cooling system doesn't exist. Within 30 minutes, the reactor will overheat and melt through the hull. The submarine will become a radioactive tomb at the bottom of the ocean. But that's not the worst part. The heat will trigger the nuclear missiles, 16 warheads detonating simultaneously. A nuclear explosion large enough to be detected by American radar. They'll think it's a Soviet first strike. World War III will begin. Millions will die. All because of a cracked pipe on a cursed submarine. Zateyev has two choices: surface near the NATO fleet and ask for rescue, save his crew but betray his country, reveal Soviet nuclear secrets to the enemy, or send his men into the reactor compartment to repair the cooling system manually. A suicide mission. The radiation levels in that compartment are over 1 roentgens per hour. A lethal dose. Anyone who enters will die slowly and painfully. Zateyev stands in the control room, surrounded by his young crew, boys in their 20s looking at him for salvation. He thinks of his wife, his children. He thinks of Moscow, Leningrad, millions of innocent people who will die if this submarine explodes. He makes his choice. He activates the ship-wide intercom. His voice is steady, but his hands are shaking. This is the captain. We have a reactor emergency. I need volunteers to enter the reactor compartment and construct a manual cooling system. The radiation exposure will be fatal. I cannot order anyone to do this. I can only ask. He waits. Silence fills the boat. Then, slowly, hands begin to rise. Officers, engineers, young sailors barely out of training. They step forward one by one. 27 men volunteer to die. Captain Zateyev looks at their faces and sees no fear, only determination. The curse of K-19 demands its sacrifice, and these men will pay the price to save the world. The volunteers gather in the control room, 27 men who just signed their own death sentences. The youngest is 22-year-old reactor technician Yuri Ordin. He has a girlfriend waiting for him in Leningrad. They were supposed to get married in 3 months. He knows he'll never see her again. But he doesn't hesitate. Next to him stands Lieutenant Boris Rizhikov, 29 years old, father of 2 small children. He writes a quick note to his wife, folds it carefully, and hands it to a sailor. Give this to her if I don't make it. They all know there is no if. Chief Engineer Yuri Pozviatko takes charge. There's no time for protective equipment that doesn't exist anyway. They construct a makeshift cooling system from spare pipes and valves. It's crude, but it might work. The plan is simple and horrifying. Teams of 2 men will enter the reactor compartment in shifts. Each team gets 5 to 7 minutes maximum before the radiation kills them. They'll carry heavy pipes, position them, weld connections, then get pulled out before they collapse. The next team goes in. and the next, until the job is done or everyone is dead. The reactor compartment temperature is now 93 degrees Celsius, humidity near 100%, and radiation levels are off the scale. The dosimeters max out at 1,000 roentgens per hour. Nobody knows the real number. Could be 5,000, could be 10,000. It doesn't matter. They're all lethal. The men strip down to underwear and canvas aprons. Anything more will melt to their skin. They wrap wet towels around their faces. It won't protect them from radiation, but maybe they can breathe a little longer. First team enters. Reactor officers Korchalov and Loktev. They open the hatch and a wall of superheated radioactive steam hits them in the face. Loktev later describes it as breathing liquid fire. They can't see 3 meters ahead. They feel their way forward, dragging a 40-kilogram pipe section. Every breath burns. Their skin feels like it's cooking. The radiation tears through their cells, shredding DNA, destroying organs from the inside. 4 minutes in, Korchalov starts vomiting blood inside his respirator. He's choking, but keeps working. 5 minutes. The pipe is in position. They stumble out, faces bright red, eyes bloodshot. Their hands are already swelling like balloons. Second team, third team, fourth. Each group spends their final healthy minutes in hell. Some collapse after 3 minutes. Others push to 6 or 7 before their legs give out. They're dragged from the compartment unconscious, skin blistered and peeling. Dr. Savrin works frantically in the medical bay, but there's nothing he can do. Radiation sickness has no cure. He injects morphine and watches them suffer. One sailor, 23-year-old Ivan Kulikov, begs the doctor to kill him. The pain is too much. Dr. Savrin can't do it. He just holds the boy's hand and lies. You're going to be fine. You're going to make it. After 3 hours, the improvised cooling system is complete. Chief Engineer Pozviatko activates it with shaking hands. For a terrible moment, nothing happens. Then, slowly, the reactor temperature begins to drop. 800 degrees, 700, 600, they did it. The meltdown is stopped. The submarine is saved. The world is saved. But the cost is unspeakable. 27 men absorbed lethal radiation doses. Their bodies are already dying. They sit together in the crew quarters, looking at each other with hollow eyes. They're dead men walking, and the real horror is just beginning. Because dying from radiation doesn't happen quickly. It happens slowly, painfully, over days and weeks. And they're trapped on a submarine in the middle of the ocean with no way home. The changes begin immediately. Within 2 hours of leaving the reactor compartment, the men's faces turn crimson red, then dark purple. Their hands swell to twice their normal size. Fingernails fall off. Hair comes out in clumps when they touch it. The youngest volunteer, Yuri Orden, looks in a mirror and doesn't recognize himself. His face is a grotesque mask of swollen flesh and burst blood vessels. He starts to cry, but no tears come. The radiation has destroyed his tear ducts. The submarine is still hundreds of miles from Soviet territory. Captain Zatayev sends an emergency signal to Moscow. Reactor emergency, multiple casualties, request immediate evacuation. The response takes 6 agonizing hours. When it finally comes, it's not what they hoped for. Maintain radio silence. Proceed to rendezvous point. Do not approach NATO vessels under any circumstances. They're expendable. The mission is more important than their lives. Zatayev reads the message to his crew. Nobody is surprised. They knew the rules when they joined the Navy. Dr. Savrin's medical bay becomes a chamber of horrors. The radiation victims are deteriorating rapidly. Their skin blisters and splits open, oozing clear fluid mixed with blood. The smell is unbearable, a mixture of burnt flesh and decay. Some men develop radiation burns so severe that their muscles are visible beneath destroyed skin. Others suffer internally. Their intestinal linings are dissolving. They vomit constantly, bringing up blood and pieces of tissue. The morphine supply runs out after 2 days. After that, there's only screaming. Lieutenant Rizhikov, the father of 2, tries to write another letter to his wife. His hands shake so badly he can barely hold the pen. After 10 minutes of effort, he manages to scrawl 5 words. I love you. Forgive me. Then his hand cramps and won't open. The pen falls to the floor. He stares at it and laughs. A horrible, broken sound. What's the point? He'll be dead before the letter reaches her anyway. Another sailor, 24-year-old Mikhail Krasikov, keeps asking when they'll reach port. How much longer? When can we get to a hospital? Nobody has the heart to tell him the truth. There is no hospital that can save them. They're already ghosts. On the 5th day, the first man dies. Reactor technician Yuri Orden, the 22-year-old who was supposed to get married. He dies in terrible pain, his body convulsing, blood pouring from his mouth and nose. It takes him 3 hours to finally stop breathing. Dr. Savrin sits beside the body and weeps. He's a doctor. He's supposed to save people. But against radiation, he's completely helpless. Captain Zateyev orders the body sewn into a canvas bag and stored in the coldest compartment. There will be more, many more. The healthy crew members are terrified. Radiation has leaked throughout the entire submarine. Everyone has been exposed to some degree. They don't know who will die next. Some sailors refuse to go near the contaminated sections. Others volunteer to help care for the dying men, even though it means more exposure. The boat divides into 2 groups, the living and the dying. But the line between them grows thinner every day. Because radiation doesn't just kill the ones who absorbed massive doses. It's still there, lurking in every compartment, slowly poisoning everyone on board. By day 7, 8 more men are dead. The rest of the volunteers are in critical condition. Their organs are failing one by one. Kidneys shut down, livers stop functioning. Bone marrow ceases producing blood cells. They're bleeding internally and externally. Some lose consciousness and never wake up. Others remain alert until the very end, fully aware of what's happening to them. Those are the worst cases, the ones who feel every moment of their bodies destroying themselves. Captain Zateyev visits them every day, holding their hands, telling them they're heroes. They saved the submarine. They saved the world. Some of them smile weakly at his words. Others just stare at the ceiling, waiting for death to finally arrive. 9 days after the accident, K-19 finally reaches the rendezvous point near the Kola Peninsula. A diesel submarine, S-270, arrives to escort them. But there's a problem. Moscow refuses to authorize a full evacuation. Transfer only the most critical casualties. The rest of the crew must bring K-19 back to port. Captain Zateyev can't believe the order. His men are dying. The entire submarine is contaminated. But orders are orders. He selects 14 men in the worst condition for transfer. The others must stay. The sea is rough. Waves crash over both submarines as sailors try to rig transfer lines between them. The dying men are strapped to stretchers and hauled across the gap, swinging wildly over freezing water. One sailor nearly falls into the ocean, saved only by a quick-thinking officer who grabs the stretcher cable. The transferred men are so weak they can barely hold on. Some pass out during the crossing. When they finally reach S-270, the receiving crew recoils in horror. These aren't men anymore. They're living corpses, skin hanging in strips, eyes swollen shut, bodies covered in open sores. The captain of S-270 orders them isolated in the aft torpedo room. His crew refuses to go near them. Back on K-19, the remaining contaminated sailors watch their comrades being taken away. They know what it means. They're not sick enough to evacuate. They're expendable. Lieutenant Boris Rizhikov, still barely functional despite massive radiation exposure, volunteers to stay at his post. Someone has to keep the reactor stable, he tells the captain. His hands are so swollen he can barely turn the controls, but he stays. For 3 more days, he monitors the reactor, keeping the submarine alive. On the 4th day, he collapses at his station. Blood pours from his ears and nose. He dies 6 hours later, still at his post. Captain Zateyev personally carries his body to the storage compartment. He adds Rizhikov's name to the growing list of the dead. The journey back to port takes 11 days. 11 days of slow agony for the dying crew. 11 days of terror for the healthy ones who don't know if they'll be next. The submarine stinks of death and decay. Ventilation systems spread the smell throughout every compartment. Men vomit from the odor alone. Some refuse to eat. What's the point? They're all contaminated. They're all going to die eventually. Just a matter of time. Morale collapses. Sailors sit in corners, staring at nothing. Some write farewell letters to families they'll never see again. Others just wait for the symptoms to start. On the transported submarine S-270, the situation is even worse. The 14 evacuated men are dying in the torpedo room with minimal medical care. The submarine's doctor's overwhelmed and terrified. He's never seen radiation sickness before. He doesn't know what to do. He administers morphine when he has it, water when he doesn't. 3 men die during the transit. Their bodies are sewn into weighted bags and buried at sea. A quick ceremony, a few words, then into the dark water. Nobody watches them sink. It's too depressing. The survivors envy them. At least their suffering is over. July the 19th, 1961. 15 days after the accident, K-19 finally arrives at the naval base in Severomorsk. The pier is empty. No welcoming committee, no families, no doctors rushing to help. Just a few officers in protective suits and a line of ambulances. The crew is ordered to disembark immediately. They're taken directly to a secret military hospital, isolated from the outside world. Their families are told nothing, just that there was an incident and the crew is under observation. The submarine itself is towed to a remote bay and abandoned. It's too contaminated to approach. Engineers estimate the radiation levels won't drop to safe levels for 30 years. At the hospital, doctors realize the true scale of the disaster. Of the 27 men who entered the reactor compartment, 22 absorbed fatal doses. 8 are already dead. The remaining 14 won't survive more than a few weeks. Another 15 crew members who didn't enter the reactor still receive dangerous exposure levels. They'll develop cancers and die within 2 years. The doctors do what they can, but it's mostly palliative care. Blood transfusions, antibiotics for infections, morphine for pain, and paperwork. Lots of paperwork. Every case must be documented, photographed, studied. These men are dying, but at least their deaths will teach Soviet medicine about radiation exposure. Small comfort. Captain Zatayev survives. He received significant radiation exposure, but not a fatal dose. He watches his crew die one by one in hospital beds. He holds their hands. He listens to their final words. He promises to tell their families they were heroes. Most of them don't care about being heroes anymore. They just want the pain to stop. By August 15th, all 22 of the fatally exposed men are dead. The longest survivor lasted 37 days, the shortest, 9. Captain Zatayev attends every funeral, 22 funerals in 3 weeks, and at every one he asks himself the same question. Was it worth it? They saved the submarine. They prevented World War III. But was it worth 22 lives? He still doesn't know the answer. The Soviet government immediately classifies everything about K-19 as top secret. The crew is ordered to never speak about what happened, not to their families, not to their friends, not to anyone. They're threatened with court-martial and prison if they talk. The families of the dead are told their sons and husbands died in training accidents. No details, no explanations, just closed coffins and state funerals with generic speeches. The widows and mothers cry and ask questions. They get no answers. The truth is buried along with the bodies. But K-19's curse isn't finished. After repairs and decontamination that take 2 years, the submarine returns to service in 1964. The Navy needs her. She's too expensive to scrap. A new crew is assigned. They're told nothing about the accident, just that K-19 had technical problems that are now fixed. The new sailors board nervously. Rumors spread through the fleet, stories about a cursed submarine, a floating coffin. Most dismiss it as superstition. They're wrong. February 1972. K-19 is on patrol in the North Atlantic. 11 years after the reactor disaster, a fire breaks out in compartment 9 near the nuclear reactor. The exact cause is never determined. Maybe faulty wiring, maybe sabotage by the curse itself. The fire spreads rapidly through electrical cables and oil-soaked machinery. Thick black smoke fills the compartments. The crew tries to fight it, but the flames are too intense. Captain Sergei Lyachin makes a terrible decision. To save the submarine and prevent another reactor meltdown, he orders compartments 8 and 9 sealed, with 28 men still inside. The men trapped in the sealed compartments pound on the hatches and scream for help. The rest of the crew can hear them through the metal, begging, pleading, cursing. But the hatches stay locked. If they open them, smoke and fire will spread to the reactor. Everyone will die. So 28 men are sacrificed to save 60. It takes them 3 hours to die. Some suffocate from smoke inhalation, others burn to death as the fire reaches them. A few try to break through the hatches with tools. They fail. By the time the fire is extinguished and the hatches are opened, all 28 are dead, charred bodies piled against the doors they couldn't escape through. K-19 has claimed more victims. The submarine limps back to port. This time, there's no cover-up possible. Too many dead, too many families asking questions. The Soviet Navy is forced to admit there was a serious incident, but still no details. Still no truth. K-19 is decommissioned in 1990, finally retired after 30 years of service and 55 dead crew members. She sits in a naval scrapyard, slowly rusting, still too radioactive to fully dismantle. The curse made metal. For decades, the 1961 reactor disaster remains classified. Captain Zetayev is forbidden from speaking about it. He watches in silence as his men are forgotten. No medals, no recognition, no memorials. Just unmarked graves and official lies. It eats at him for years. In 1991, after the Soviet Union collapses, he finally tells the story publicly. He's 65 years old and dying of cancer caused by his radiation exposure 30 years earlier. He wants the world to know what his crew did, how they saved millions of lives, how they died horrible deaths for their country and got nothing in return. The story shocks the world. International journalists investigate. Survivors are interviewed. Medical records are unsealed. The full horror of K-19 is finally revealed. In 1998, 37 years after the disaster, the surviving crew members and families of the dead are finally given medals for heroism. Most of the survivors are dead by then. Captain Zetayev receives his medal in a hospital bed. He's too weak to stand. He dies 3 months later. His last words are about his crew. They were heroes, all of them. The world needs to remember. Today, K-19 still exists, partially dismantled in a Russian naval yard. The reactor compartment remains sealed, still too radioactive to approach safely. It will stay that way for another 50 years at least. A metal tomb for the ghosts of 55 dead sailors. Some workers at the yard refuse to go near it. They say you can hear sounds coming from inside at night. Metallic groans, voices, screaming. Maybe it's just the wind and the shifting metal of an old submarine slowly falling apart. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe K-19's curse still lives in that radioactive steel, waiting, hungry, ready to claim more lives, because some ships aren't meant to die. They're meant to kill. Forever. The men of K-19 saved the world from nuclear war in 1961, but the world forgot them for 30 years. They volunteered to die, knowing they'd never be thanked, never be remembered. That's true heroism, not the kind that gets parades and monuments, the kind that happens in darkness and silence and is buried with the bodies. 22 men entered a reactor compartment knowing they'd never leave alive. They did it anyway, not for glory, not for recognition, but because someone had to. And that's what makes their story so important. Because real heroes don't always get happy endings. Sometimes they just get death. And decades later, maybe, if they're lucky, they get the truth.